So on the show, Nate is always the resistant one to
don't do it
the concept of music.
Nate wants me to be Scrape It and
Bosco.
95 the whole record.
Bosco.
That ain't how Classics is made. Classics is made with diversity music.
So he wants you.
I wanna hit the
He want
perk.
block talk.
No, I don't want block.
He want
He want block work all the way.
all
through.
the way. That don't make classics. I'm trying to make a classic. You gotta have diversity music for everybody, but still being myself.
For everybody, do y'all like 95?
If anybody on here, if you didn't hear 95,
If you didn't hear 95,
you need to go check it out.
Go check out 95.
But if you did hear 95 and you like 95, put 95 in the chat.
That's right. And if you heard Scrape It, this man right here did Scrape It. 95 was done by these two. Now, we ain't gonna get into the other track he talking about. Cause you hear the difference in what I'm trying to tell you people.
When the album drops.
And
So yeah, your idea of like not just Tony Bosco, but Tony Bosco, you wanted a set theme for an album, or you into the flexibility of like having that record for the ladies.
see, somebody put 95 is fire. See, you heard?
Shout out to
But we
C.
know that already.
It's
It is
fire. Now, how y'all did 95?
How we did it?
Yeah. How 95 came about?
I was recording Scrape It in this studio with Spud.